Happy Thursday evening, everybody, or whenever you're watching this, I suppose. I appreciate you tuning in tonight. Welcome. Thank you for joining. As always, I welcome comments and conversation. That is what I do this for. And hopefully, with your conversation, it will be a fun and interesting night. We are just days away from 2024, believe it or not. I personally am a little bit in panic mode because I cannot believe that we're literally just a couple of days from 2024. Christmas was a whirlwind. I'm sure it probably was for your family as well. So what can we expect for 2024 with the real estate market? And that's what we're going to go over tonight. But first, I wanted to share something that really bothers me with you guys. Like I said, drop a comment below. Tell me where you're from. Let me know any questions that you might have in the chat, if they've been questions that are lingering or questions that come up as we go over things. I definitely want to make sure that we are hitting all of that. Anthony, happy early 2024. Yes, my friend, and you and I will catch up to talk about all of this in more detail, the fun conversations that we have. So this is something that I'm seeing everywhere. Let's share my screen here. Oh, look at that. It decided to work today. Joy for me. So these are the top stories. And I don't know if you can see here, mortgage rates or mortgage interest rates nosedive, mortgage rates down to another 7-month low, but just barely. So rates keep falling, lowest level since spring. 15-year terms edge down. So there's just this, I don't know, it just feels like they're trying to drive so hard. And then some of them are saying that they nosedive, and then others are like, well, we're barely, getting there. So I feel like it's a constant, how are you supposed to, as the consumer, ever really understand what in the world is going on? Because every headline is saying something different, or they're doing what I call fear mongering, where they're telling you, you better get out there right now, or you're totally going to miss the bus on being able to purchase a home because interest rates are just the lowest that they've been. And you have to be a part of that. And I just don't really feel that way. I really feel like, yes, interest rates, it is a fact, interest rates are lower than they have been in quite some time. In pretty much this year, we're back down to 7%, in some cases in 6%, with a 6, in the front of it. We are not down to the low sixes and as far as interest rates go yet, but we are in some cases in the high sixes, but most of the time right there hovering at 7%. Now, a month ago, we were at 8%. So let me share my screen again, because I just love going over this stuff with you guys. So if we go down here and we look at Freddie Mac, good old Freddie Mac. So we're looking at 6.61 for a 30-year. That's a little low in my opinion. Most of my clients that have been getting loans right now have been quoted closer to 6.9 to 7%. But what I wanted to look at here is the rates. So this is looking at quite some time. But if we go just here, well, let's do it even smaller. Let's just do 2020. Okay. So if we look, they dipped and then we went up. And so here in October of 2022, we kind of hit a high, and then they started to come back down. And that's when you started to see a lot of buyers coming back into the market, because I think a lot of people thought we were going to start seeing what we saw in 2020. But then we started to see this trend back up. And so the highest that they're saying we got was 7.79. We both all know that that's not true. We actually did hit 8% at one point in November, but then they did start to come down, and we're back down to, they're saying 6.61. I'm going to say 7% in some specific cases. If you have great credit and low DTI, then you're looking at possibly having a 6 in the front of it. But it is a good sign that interest rates are starting to come back down. Now, are they going to continue to go back down? Is the big question that a lot of people are continuing to ask, because we've had a lot of buyers that have kind of put their search on hold because going in at 8% interest is completely changing their affordability. And that's what today's video is all about, is the affordability, and should you be purchasing, and can you actually purchase a home now that interest rates have come back down? Because 8% to 7% or even 6.5% is a massive amount, and that changes your purchasing power. So there's some people that are already talking about doing a refi that just bought a couple months ago because they can already save that much. Now, I do not recommend going ahead and doing a refi at this point. It's just not worth it because of the fees that you will incur on doing a refi. You're still going to pay some sort of closing cost, although it is not the same as when you purchase the home originally. So I would hold off on doing a refi, see where rates go this year, and maybe do a refinance at that time. Anytime there's a presidential election year, rates usually seem to do something during that year. Let's be honest, everybody wants to look good. I don't care what side of the coin you're on. Everybody wants to see smiling faces in the economy. And well, I don't think that's happening a lot right now. So Betty Ayers, howdy from Dawson. Love me some Dawson. Hello from Buford. Oh, just down the street from me. Hello, guys. Thanks for tuning in. All right. So, one of the things that I wanted to share with you guys here, looking at these interest rates, I do think that we're going to continue to trend on a downward platform here, but I don't know that it's if we're going to see any major decreases before we are in quarter one or even quarter two. So, what can we really expect? Well, I wanted to kind of look at what we saw in 2023. So if we go back here, you know what? I'm going to just change this to 1 year. Let's look at the trend, because man, how it changes from, let's look at 3 years to 1 year. That's a drastic difference there, folks. So if we look at when we started over the course of the last year, January 2023, we were kind of at a low point. We were at $384,000 as far as the average price point in Gwinnett County. Now we were at a high point. If you look in June, that was kind of a high point for us at $435,000. We're not too far off of that now at $417,000. So we did see this dip as interest rates, because if you remember, June is kind of when interest rates in 2022 started to rise. And so we started to see this downward fall of interest, or I'm sorry, interest rates went up. So home purchase went down. A lot of that stemmed from inventory. We had a lack of inventory because sellers had nowhere to go. They weren't going to be purchasing anything. So they took their homes off of the market. So over here, we were at a low point of 384,000. We are just at 417 now, just what, 15,000 basically off of the highest point. So we're not too far off. So what is trending us higher? Again, the interest rates reducing is going to be one thing. And then another thing is the lack of inventory. There's still buyers that have to buy. And so with little inventory out there, buyers are willing to pay for what they want and what they can find. So next year, will we start to see some inventory come on the market? That's a great question. Nobody has a crystal ball. I don't care what any of the headlines are telling you. They do not know. I do think and hope that with interest rates coming down, that some of the sellers that were kind of on the fence about selling, they really want to sell, but they're nervous to sell because where am I supposed to go? And interest rates are so high. If interest rates come down, hopefully they will see that as a positive and take that opportunity, because that would free up some housing in the inventory for other buyers. I have a few buyers right now that all want to get into homes this year. They don't really care what interest rates are because it's a need for them. And it's not just a desire, it's a necessity for them. And so not having inventory is kind of boxing them in. So if we look at, kind of new listings for the year, again, like we talked about, seeing those trending numbers go down. We started at almost 2,000 homes and we were down to less than 1,000, 671. Now, again, we're only at 827 homes. Now, historically in Georgia, you will always start to see kind of in December, January, our numbers are lower. It's just the way that history repeats itself. People here just kind of go in, it's cold. And so there's not a ton of buying and selling going on in those months compared to our summer months, which are going to be our busiest months. So we might see in the spring numbers start to go back up. And that's what I believe everybody is hopeful for. However, it will really depend on if we start to get some of that inventory in. The one thing I'm going to say to this is the people that control the narrative here, really and truly at the end of the day, is you guys. You guys are the ones that control the narrative. And you may not realize that, but if we go back, and I'm going to put this back on my screen, we're going to play with it a little bit. If we look at 3 years back in 2020, we were just trucking along, kind of normal, in January and February. And then in March, that's when everything hit. And then going down over here is kind of, we plummeted, right? And then all of a sudden we have all of these crazy hills, which we normally don't have, because if we go over here and we go like 5 years back, we have the number. I'm sorry, we should be looking at sales price. There we go. We have the normal trajectory, right? But then all of a sudden over COVID is when all of this happened. Now we seem to be on that same kind of trajectory, although we're having some highs and some lows. But what hasn't happened is we haven't come back down, which I think a lot of people were anticipating. And unfortunately, we just don't have that. No one is predicting that home prices are going to come down next year. So, Anthony, do you think the lower rates will create a crazy market like back in 2021, or do we not have enough inventory for that scenario? So that's what I'm talking about. The people that control this narrative are going to be you as the buyers and the sellers. A lot of people are hearing that you have to rush out to buy something because interest rates are coming down, and now you're going to be competing against other people and multiple offers and 100,000 over. So you have to rush out and buy the house of your dreams right now, or you'll never get it. Part of that, like an inkling of that, is true. Is there going to be more buyers? Yes, because when interest rates come down, more buyers are going to come off of the fence. My hope is that buyers learned their lesson in 2020, 2021, specifically 2022. People started to calm down. But my hope is that this is not going to be like a, Black Friday sale and everybody's going to say, oh, I want the, tickle me Elmo and rush out. I'm hoping that people will realize interest rates are still at 6%. Even if they're reduced, they're still at 6%. Even if we get to 5%, great. We're not at 2.5. We're not at 3, and we're not going to be. So do not rush out making ridiculous offers, waiving your firstborn to not have an inspection, or waiving the appraisal, because these are not smart decisions in the long term. So my hope is that the general public kind of learned from the insanity that was the last couple of years, and that now when interest rates are starting to come out, yes, we will see buyers entering the market. Yes, we will hopefully see a little bit more inventory come on the market, which would balance things out. But my hope is that people will do it with a little bit more grace than 2020 and 2021, because if not, then we could start to see the same thing that happened before. We're still in certain locations in certain neighborhoods are seeing multiple offers. It hasn't stopped altogether, but it has backed off quite a bit. Anthony, great question. I was wondering the same thing. Guys, did that help answer that question? So there was a home, I think I told you guys a couple weeks ago on that live, that is in a very desired neighborhood, very desired school district. The home itself had been completely renovated, so it was very move-in ready. And that home had multiple offers. I think they had 42 showings over the weekend, sold it for over asking price. But they did have the contingency of a home inspection, and they did have an appraisal in place. So those are things that, in my opinion, you should not be waiving unless you are very confident with the home's value. We've looked at the comps and we're very, we're right on point. If there's a question about it, then you need to be having those things in place to ultimately protect you in the long run. So in 2024, I wanted to kind of show you guys this here. These are the predictions. Now, some of them are interesting. The home prices, home sales, and mortgage rates in 2024. So Fannie Mae is looking at a 2.4% home price increase. Goldman Sachs is looking at 0.6. Realtor.com and Redfin are both looking at negatives of about 1%. National Association of Realtors, quite frankly, I don't really even look at because I feel like it's kind of swayed in their direction. But so realistically, either way, if we're looking at any of these and we take the average, we're looking at right at about 1% increase, which is not a substantial amount to increase next year. So that's actually a great thing. Going backwards is not necessarily a positive for those that have purchased, but not increasing a substantial amount is actually exactly what we need, because we cannot continue at the rates of increase that we have the past couple of years. That's what's making home affordability unrealistic. And so if we can kind of plateau for a little while to let things catch up to the last couple of years, because here in Georgia, a typical year, we're rising somewhere between 4 to 6%. That's how much equity you can kind of estimate that you would be gaining each year, is about 4 to 6%. Well, when in 1 year we're gaining 15 to 20%, you're looking at 3 to 4 years equity all in 1 year's time, and that's just not sustainable. So even looking at this, seeing 1% increase, that's fine. That is going to be a healthy market, because it's going to allow job markets to catch up. It's going to allow raises and just the general cost of living to catch up to what these numbers have gone to. But if you're looking at this going down, Fannie Mae is saying that we're going to see about 4.8 million in sales. National Association of Realtors is really close in. Zillow coming in with the lowest at 3.74. So all of these are still trending that we will see a large number of sales, but it will not be like the last couple of years. So if you look here, mortgage rate predictions. So Fannie Mae saying that we'll get down to 6.7. Realtor.com is saying we'll get to 6.8. Redfin also 6.8, and National Association of Realtors 6.3. So again, right under that 7% mark, getting back in the sixes. So that is a positive, but no, it's not going to be like the last couple of years that we saw, where it was at 2 and 3%, even 4%. So I do hope that later on in 2024, we get down even a little bit further, maybe into the high fives would be a great place to land. But if you look at things historically, we were kind of in the sixes before, shortly before all of this started. I know right before this started in 2019 and 2020, we were hovering in the high fours, low fives. So to get back to that would be prime. So if we can get into the sixes, I'll take it over sevens and eights. So what should you do to prepare for 2024? Because this is my big thing. I don't want you seeing all of these headlines and thinking that you have to run out and jump on things, because that's just not the way that it is. So the first thing is making sure that you've talked to a lender. And I hear a lot of people say, well, I don't want to talk to a lender until I'm ready to purchase. And I just think that's stupid, because how are you even knowing how much you're purchasing? Are you able to purchase? I always say the very first step is talking to a lender. And if you don't know a lender, then talk to me and I will put you in touch with a lender, because the first thing they're going to do is help you check your credit score. And if your credit score isn't where it needs to be, then they can actually talk to you and give you guidance on how to increase that credit score. So if you're 6 months down the road from wanting to purchase or needing to purchase, you have time to do things to increase that. Because let's see, 690 and under, which some people, a 690 is not a horrible score, but it's not a great score. And 690 and under, you're only going to be able to go FHA. And with FHA, you're putting, money down because you're going to be paying PMI, which is private mortgage insurance, unless you're putting at least 20% down on that loan or more. And used to, once you paid the loan down to 20%, so let's say you put down 5% to start with, and then you paid the loan down to 20%, then, or your equity came up and you had 20% equity vested, then the PMI would just come off of the loan. That doesn't happen anymore. So if you think that you have 20% equity, or you've been paying on your loan for a while and you think that you've paid 20% in, you might want to check that, because it doesn't just fall off anymore. And that's a couple $100 or more that you're paying every month in private mortgage insurance. That's basically covering the lender's rear end, so that if you defaulted on the loan, the lender has that money that you've been paying in to cover the lender's butt. This does nothing for you. So if you think that you've paid in, check that, because you can call your lender and tell them you want to have that PMI removed, because it does not just fall off any longer. 700 credit score and higher, you're going to be looking at possibly being able to do a conventional loan. Now, what's the difference? Conventional loans, a lot of times you're going to get a little better interest rate than you would getting an FHA loan, a first-time homebuyer's loan. Those are things, again, to talk to the lender about. And so talking to the lender is going to be your definite first move. Looking at the next thing, you want to make sure that you've got your down payment secured. So if you've been saving money, you want to make sure that you've got enough, because a lot of people don't realize that your down payment is one factor, right? You want to have at least 3% is going to be the lowest amount that you're able to put down on an FHA. A lot of people are putting between 5 and anything over that down. And that's just your down payment. The other part to that is going to be your closing cost. This is completely separate than your down payment funds. So if we're looking at, I was kind of playing with some numbers here. If you're looking at doing, a $400,000 property, you're going to be doing 3% of that roughly for your down payment. And then you can look at closing costs, usually are roughly 2% of the purchase price. It's going to vary based on the county that you're in, because that's going to, vary with the tax amount that they're charging. But you can usually use 2 to 2.5% for closing costs. So you're looking at 5 to 5.5% total. Now, back in 2019, we were seeing a lot of sellers covering the cost of closing costs. Sellers legally cannot assist with down payment assistance. They can, however, assist with the closing cost fees that are being charged. But the last couple of years, we have not been seeing that. So buyers are having to come up with that full, 5% or more to cover closing costs and down payment. So you want to make sure that you've got that squared away. And if you're pulling this money from 401k or savings, anything like that, you want to make sure that you know the repercussions that could come from that. And the only way to do that is, again, by looking at things, planning it out ahead, and then really talking it through and making sure that it's worth what you've been doing. Anthony, is it the FHA loans that are only available to be assumed? Also, is there a condition when assuming a mortgage is favorable for a buyer? So FHA loans are the ones that can be assumed. Is it favorable to a buyer? Most of the time it can be, if it is the right terms. So obviously, let's say that I have a 3% mortgage or a 2.75% mortgage, and you want to assume that. There are fees that are going to be incurred with that. However, if you see yourself living here for a long time and you're going to be having that low interest rate for quite some time, then yes, it can very well make sense for you to do that. The issue is, a lot of times to the seller, it's not really worth it. It just depends on where they're going, their next step in life. Why are they selling this, and where are they going after they make this sale? So one of the biggest things for me is going back to talking with the lender. You want to know your DTI, or your debt to income ratio. And you figure this out by basically looking at your mortgage payment, which this is where you need the lender. You don't know your mortgage payment yet. And then all of your other debts. All of your other debts include, let me be very crystal clear, they include if you have alimony payments, if you have child support payments, any and all credit cards. Please do not think that just because you hid them from the lender that they're not going to find out. That's a joke. They're going to pull it. They're going to see your credit. They're going to see everything that comes out of your bank account. So any credit card that you have, if you have a car payment, so anything like that, you add those all together, and then they will look at some different numbers and they'll play with mortgage monthly payments. So they'll kind of back you in that way to say, okay, if we played with $3,000 a month as a mortgage payment plus your debts that you already have, and then they divide that by your gross monthly income to see what will that look like for you. And they're trying to make sure that you're less than 43% debt to income ratio, that you still have at least 50% of your income going into the bank to pay for other things, right? Or to have for savings. Now, it's sad to me that we have to have lenders tell us you shouldn't spend more than 50% of your income. But unfortunately, that's how we roll now. And even at 43%, that's high. That's really high, you guys. And you should really be looking at that and thinking, if you see yourself, you just got a job and you know that this is going to be going places, you're going to be getting a raise, or you're working on a promotion and you see this happening, go for it. If you're not sure what's going to happen in the future, then you really need to second guess this, because being a house poor is not cool. It's just not. You can't have people over because all you have is ramen noodles and PBJs, and that's just not fun. It's not great. So you want to make sure that you have money in the bank, because the fact of the matter is, owning a home is not just about getting the home itself. I'm here to tell you that my husband and I purchased the home that we're in right now in 2011. And I had my daughter, who was 2, and I had just found out when we moved in here that I was pregnant with my son. And about 2 months later, we had great plans of our fixer-upper that we were going to redo the kitchen, and our AC went out. So $8,500 later, I had a new AC. And so there went half of my kitchen budget. So I had to continue to save. Well, then the garage door broke and I had to have a new garage door in Springs. The multiple things that have gone wrong because my home is an older home. And these are things that just had to be done. So over the last 12 years, I will spare you the amount of money that I have chosen to spend, because I wanted a fixer-upper. I wanted something that I could make my own, and I liked the charm and the character of an older home. However, when you buy a home, there are things that cost money. There are going to be your utility bills that are coming every month. There's your taxes that come up. There's your HOA, fees. There's always going to be things, and you have to keep those factored in. Do not sit here and sell yourself on the fact that if you can just make your monthly, mortgage payments, that you're golden, because that's a joke and you're shooting yourself in the foot. So focus on savings, focus on having a plan, focus on, not trying to time the market, not rushing out because you hear that interest rates dropped, because you can always, refinance, or you can always do something later. You should never rush into such a big purchase, because reality is that, buying a home is probably one of the biggest, if not the largest, expense you're ever going to have. So howdy, Miss Lazarian. Hello. Oh, come on. PBJ's in room is the best. There's been plenty of times I've been eating PBJs in Raymond, and let's be honest, there still are some days because I choose to, but not because I have to. And that's the whole purpose of this, is you want to choose to eat those things, not because you have to eat those things. It should always be a choice. So my biggest takeaway is 2024 is going to be a roller coaster. You're going to see a ton of different headlines. Do not give into them. Do not be fear oriented with them. Do not do something that you don't feel comfortable doing. You should be doing this because it's something that you've thought about, it's something that you've planned, it's something that you have looked at, and it makes financial sense for you at this time. Talk to a lender. If you don't have one, call me. I'll put you in touch with them, because you want to look at the numbers and make sure that it does genuinely make sense, because this is your future that you're talking about. I keep also hearing people saying, oh, well, don't look at your house as an investment. Yeah, absolutely look at your house as an investment, because that's what it is. You stay in that home. You don't have to always, one up the next person. If you're able to stay in this home and pay it down, then you have, something that is going to be there for you as you age, whether it's staying in that home, now you're retired and don't have a mortgage, don't have a rental payment, or whether it's now selling that home, going and getting into something smaller and you're taking that equity, or maybe you need to go into an assisted living now and you're selling that home or having a reverse mortgage to pay for the assisted living. There are tons of reasons that home ownership is still a very smart investment. I don't care what anyone's telling you. So with that said, I hope everybody has a fantastic new year, and I look forward to talking to all of you in 2024. Happy New Year.